Welcome to Agency Bites, a podcast for agency owners, hosted by agency veteran and coach Steve Guberman. Agency Bites is a podcast focused on delivering actionable agency information from agency experts in about 25 minutes. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
Welcome to Agency Bites. It's a podcast for agency owners. I'm Steve Guberman from Agency Outsight, where I coach agency owners to build the agency of their dreams. On this episode, I have the exciting opportunity to speak with James Martin, aka the designer who helps other designers, aka Made by James, as he goes by on his social media handles. I asked James to join me because just really how much I've admired how he's grown his following and his practice, his skills, his services, and just how he communicates to people through social media. James is a super talented UK designer. He dedicates an immense amount of his time and his talents and efforts to design education, a lot of it for free. The stuff that's not free is like, a couple of bucks, nothing. But he just puts it all out there, like in his content, everything from like tips about Adobe and tricks of like how he, designed a logo or, different ways to do things, all the way through like the feelings that we all feel of imposter syndrome. And so I just really wanted to get James here. He's an author, a speaker, like I said, a talented designer, and recently a design partner at Lincoln Design. So, James, thank you so much for joining me. How are you today, my friend?
Do you know what? You said you were going to mess that intro up, but you did very, very well. I like it. It was perfect. Nice one.
One take.
Yeah, one take wonder. I appreciate you. I'm pumped to be here and happy to chat about everything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I started following you a couple years ago. And like I said, before we hit the record button, I tried to figure out when. And the best way I could gauge it was I looked back through your social content to the length of your beard and the length of your hair. And that gave me an idea of when it might have been. But you've come a long way. And I'm curious like about your evolution as a designer, and even before like, starting to put it all out on social, like, what your process was to get to not even today, but like when you started feeling confident to put things out there to the world.
Oh God, like that's a very open-ended question, but I'll try and kind of break it down. So obviously, so for anybody that doesn't know me, I suppose, James Martin, Made by James, been kind of I've been in the design world for 20 years, so I was designing before the likes of even Facebook and Instagram or any of these social media platforms were even an idea, I suppose. Or they might have been an idea, but they just weren't in the world. So when we talk about the rise of like Made by James as a human, I suppose it started maybe 12 years ago or 11 years ago-ish. I can't really remember was when the first post I did on Instagram was, but it was over a decade ago. And I realized that quite early on that social media, as we call it, was an immensely powerful marketing tool. I knew it was a great way to, I was a slightly greener designer, like 12 to 11, 10, a decade ago, 11 years ago, 12 years ago, whatever it was. And I was always looking for research online and trying to be inspired and trying to find ways of, becoming more of myself and all the rest of it. And I just started to share my process. I just started to share my work. And I was sharing, like I said, I was sharing content before content was cool, or sharing content or creating content was cool. Yeah. So I was very early on with some of my peers and some of my friends who were doing the same thing, like Chris Doe and Mike Jander, and there are a few other people doing it as well. Just kind of from there, I was like, again, sharing when like likes and engagement and algorithms weren't even a thing. It was just share work and get a couple of comments, maybe a couple of likes, and the next day share a bit more. And like it just became this this way that I found to just, well, obviously, like build a community, like talk to designers. It was a very great way of opening dialogue, and I would share some work in its early kind of realms and get feedback from people, and it was just a great way to just chat design and share work.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, we're talking about the times when I had no followers, maybe 100 or 150, and now we're up at the 640,000, and it's just been through a constant evolution of me, like you say, a constant evolution of the way I share, a constant evolution of the person I want to be and want to become. And I've definitely evolved from graphic designer into logo designer, visual identity designer, brand designer, and now do a lot of focus around design education, helping, like you say, like being the designer that helps the other designers. I found it tough to find the right information. I had to go to the library. Do you know what I mean? Like we're about the same age, you probably know what going to the library was like. We didn't have this internet or social media or access to all of these people that, you can just message your favorite designers now and talk to them or DM them. And it's so accessible now. So, I think as I've evolved, like the things and the way I share has evolved, and that's obviously evolved my business and my offering and all the rest of it. But it's been a lot of patience, a lot of perseverance, and a lot of hard work. But like, what a wonderful thing! Like, I didn't ask to be where I am now. It's just something that's happened through evolution and showing up. And I think there's a lot to say for that.
But while you didn't ask for it, like you certainly had your eyes set on it, and you were like, I want to not necessarily arrive at a place, but there's an impact I want to have. Like you've had your eyes on Lincoln Design. So like there's things that you've had your eyes on, you worked towards, as opposed to like just sitting around hoping and wishing. So you got to admire that in your perseverance. Yeah,
I think that's like I always wanted to like somewhat become something. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bothered showing up. Do you know what I mean? But it was when I say like the audience, like it was never a plan for me to grow an audience of 640,000 on Instagram alone. It was just something that happened through that continuous effort. And it was always for me, like I always wanted, I think there's a big difference between design influencers and a designer with influence. I've never wanted to be in that category, which is why I've never done like paid ads. Like you can look through the whole of my content and I've never done one paid ad. Like it's just not why I do the things I do. I want to, like I said, like I want to work with the best designers. I want to work with the biggest brands in design, and Nike, Disney now, and all the rest of it. So, like, yes, Lincoln was always like a brand that I looked up to, and to now be a creative partner in that business and Dan Jansen being a very good friend of mine is bonkers. When I think 12 years ago when I started, like. How have I managed to get here? But it proves that if you stick at it, do you know what I mean? People notice, and it's mad, absolutely mad.
Yeah, I think the thing that you stuck at the most, because it wasn't about how many followers can I get or how many views, it was the core principle of I want to give it back, I want to give it away, I want to share my knowledge, I want to inspire others, and again, I think that's the core of any really good marketing quote unquote strategy is giving things away. Like a good friend of mine, Taji Antasio, talks all the time about give, and just put out what you know and share it. And you talk about like get rid of the gatekeepers, and I really think that's vital to anybody that like wants to build something without paid ads, without just get people into what you've got in your brain. And so I think that's the core principle, and the results, the rewards, whatever you want to call it, are the kind of clients you're getting, the pricing that you're getting for the work that you're doing, the way that your line of services have expanded. And yeah, you got more followers, and so, I think you stuck to the core principle, and that says a lot for, just a lot of education there.
Yeah. And I think it's what you say there as well is true. Like for over a decade now, I've consistently, in different ways and different formats, always talked about design, especially visual identity, logos, brand identity. It's evolved. I haven't gone from like personal branding to logo design to how to start a restaurant to do this to crypto to NFTs to AI. Like I've always stayed very true to the thing I love, and I've always been very consistent with the things that I talk about, which are, like I said, logo, visual identity, brand identity, and I've stuck there. I've evolved within that space. I now teach other people to do that, and obviously my prices have elevated from where they were 10 years ago. The abilities within that space, adding animation within visual identity and all these kind of things. But I think, like you say, the core voice is always like the giving voice, the wanting to help people voice. That's always remained true. And obviously I've elevated that as much as I can, over the years. But it's always been to the core design, logos, visual identity, brand identity. And I think that's obviously like when people come to Made by James, or they find me wherever they find me, they know what I'm going to be about. They know what I'm going to talk about. They know I'm very open and honest about my life in and outside of work as well. So, like, I think they know what they're getting. Like, there's nothing crazy going to come out. Well, there's a lot of crazy shit that comes out of my mouth, but it's all generally to do about design. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not like somebody's gonna find you through your social content and be like, "Oh, I love this guy's style," and then you show up to a meeting wearing a suit and tie and flipping the coin on them. You are through and through who you are. So yeah, that's pretty obvious. What about so you've been a solopreneur, running your own shop as the chief bottle washer, designer, everything under one person. Has that kind of been what you wanted, and now you're part of an agency? So it gives you a lot more capabilities, but have you always wanted to be just, one guy, one roof?
Well, the personal brand, the Made by James side of it, is very much a one-person band, obviously, personal brand, solopreneur. I've never called myself solopreneur, but I think I've always so I started my own design agency I can't even remember. It's a long time ago. It's about 13 years ago. Baby Giant, and I have business partner in that. We obviously had with the team grew as Made by James started to grow. So I would never say I was always by myself within a design space. I always had a little team. So like a web designer, like an animator, and all the rest of it. But obviously the Made by James brand and the visual identity and the execution of the visual identities was all on me. That was my role within my agency. Now, as Made by James has evolved and Made by James has grown, I've realized that I want to, if I help a client, I can only help so many people. But if I can help designers to help clients, then I'm theoretically helping a load more people. So that was always the reason why kind of focusing more in on the education space as of now. But being a partner in Lincoln, obviously I now get to work with a much bigger team. The team that I had at Baby Giant now works with me at Made by James, building the no-nonsense education platform. Design education platform, I should say. And then I personally work within the Lincoln crew, because obviously this still brings a lot of work in, still brings a lot of leads. I'm, like I said, the designer that helps other designers. I still believe that having a foot in the design world and being a part of client projects, like whether it's art directing or creative direction or idea generation or whatever it is, gives me more ammunition to help designers. I'm going through the things that they're going through every single day, rather than like washing my hands 10 years ago or whatever of a design agency. Because and then teaching how to build a design agency, I think like the principles and like everything are still very right, but there's so much has changed over the last decade. How clients want to work, the technology behind it, the processes. People don't really like I would say like the big agency. Do you know what I mean? Kind of process has kind of gone somewhat. Now even like the bigger brands are looking for freelancers, small agencies, because that trust, like you can prove your trust online now, whereas like if you were a big agency, you get all the big work. Now a lot of small agencies are getting the big work because even designers have started to understand their value and their worth, and they're like, well, why would I get paid like 80 grand a year as a creative director when I can earn 400 grand a year as a freelancer? Do you know what I mean? So designers are starting to understand that, wow, hang on a minute, like maybe I've got more value or more control than I think I have. So like everything's like definitely freelance has risen. Like freelance was like almost like a little bit of like this taboo thing that nobody really even talked about like 15, 20 years. Now, like kids are coming out of college just wanting to freelance. And it's like crikey, like freelance was always a reward for like being in the industry and growing your contacts and getting to a place where you could risk it. But now, like it's like such a different world, isn't it? And obviously, trying to keep up with that is always a fun thing. But it's not to say it's not possible. But I think it's, like I said, the good and the bad side of your social medias and your Instagrams is the false hope, the empty promises, the how to build a design business, a 6-figure design business in a weekend. Do you know what I mean? It just doesn't happen that way. There are still some fundamental principles, like my friend Mike Jandra always talks to me about. It's like just understanding the numbers. Like I speak to so many designers, and they have no clue how long stuff takes. Which means they have no idea how much money they're making, or they don't really know they just don't know the numbers. They don't know the data. And that's where it's really difficult to scale anything. Like you've got to know those numbers to know if you're actually making a living. Do you know what I mean? Because, $2,000 for a logo sounds great, but if it's taking you 1,000 hours, do you know what I mean? You're better off working at Costa or Starbucks. Not that that's a bad job by any means, but I'm saying, like, just because you're charging
go get an hourly job as opposed to
yeah, exactly,
yeah. You're bringing me back to like some of the first freelance projects that I had as a designer, where it was like $1,600 to build a website in Dreamweaver. Oh my God, that's all the money in the world. I'm gonna be the richest freelancer. And it took a zillion hours, and I'm sure by the time I did that math, it was like $4 an hour.
Dreamweaver, you're taking
couple logo projects I did.
Dreamweaver, you're taking me back, like animating in Flash and all that stuff as well.
Yeah. Did a ton of Flash work. But what I think you're also really digging into is like social media gives the false front that like, this thing can happen overnight and you can be super successful overnight, but you really got to cut your teeth under the experience of other people, whether it's at a shop, at an agency, or I guess people can do it right out of school or right out of technical school through some of the Adobe courses, some of the stuff that you put out, Chris Doe's content. Like, sure, people can spend nights and weekends learning, but the idea of like launching a freelance business without experience, I don't know. There's so much to learn about how to operate. You talk about knowing numbers and knowing your value. You talk about a lot of pricing formulas, which I think is really important. I think there's a lot to be said there about just, having the false sense of security of, well, so-and-so did it because his Instagram said it's super easy and successful, versus I'm going to go and spend a couple of years as a junior designer learning. So
Yeah.
what do you think? I mean, you talk a lot about knowing your worth. You mentioned it just a couple minutes ago. Like, where does that come from for you? And what has that evolution as a designer been like?
Again, like it's like I was doing, like I thought $240 when I started was fucking deal for a logo. Do you know what I mean? I was like, just rack it up, just that's a lot of money. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I'm thinking, like, I mean, your worth changes as you start to understand, like, how much money your work that you do makes for people. Like this kind of, I think value starts internally. And I
Perceived
think
value, yeah.
Yeah, very much so. And I think pricing's such a tough subject. And I truly believe you have to go through that process of undercharging. Like, and even 20 years in, like, I don't know if the prices I charge are right, but I know that my time's being covered, and I know that I'm making money, and I'm happy with what I'm charging. And if that works for the client, great. Do you know what I mean? Like, some people might say it's too much or too little, but I think it's about finding your place with pricing. I think it's the most important thing. But again, it's one of those.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you have to. It takes time. Do you know what I mean? Like, what I know now compared to what I knew when I started is unbelievable. Especially if you're trying to learn every day and grow your skills every single day. So, like, for me, it really started to kind of kick in when I learned more, when I put a bit more like onus on like what do I want to be and what do I want to become, and how can I bring more value to the world? When I started to kind of own, what I was doing and what I was putting out, it started to make me realize that, well, hang on a minute, like, the work that I'm doing, is going to go to this person, and this person's going to use it to make money. I was on calls with clients, and I would always ask them, like, silly questions, like, they're not that silly, to be fair, but like asking them, like, so what are you looking to kind of turn over, like, this year, or what are you looking to turn over the next 3 years, just to kind of get some ideas of, like, their business, and nosy, and just trying to be intrigued and ask questions. And some of these clients would come back with 3 million next year, or 10 million over. I mean, sometimes these are just wild numbers grabbed out of the air, but I was charging them $1,500 for a logo and a visual identity. And I'm like, this is the thing that I'm doing is going to get them to 10 million. So surely I'm undercharging here. So, but it's a practice thing. You've got to learn to, like, what I would say is trust yourself and say no to people. Like, having like an idea of, like, well, I know my work. If I want to do this type of project, there are a certain amount of things that I need to execute to do it properly. And that is going to cost me X amount of time, and I want to make roughly like this much an hour. And if I break that down into a price, I need a base price of like 5K or 10K or 20K or whatever it is. So if a client comes, let's say my base price was 5K. If a client came to me and said, I've only got 3,000, I'd have to say no, because it didn't align with the value that I knew my work could bring to people. And that takes a lot of practice. Saying no to a client to say yes to yourself is a very difficult, because as creative people, we're like told that, take all the money. Do you know what I mean? Like, creativity is not worth anything. So when somebody's trying to offer you money, you should take it. But there's a point where you have to start, like,
I was going to say that, but also if I say no, how do I know when the next one's coming? And what if this is the last one? And there's a lot of head trash that comes into it with self-esteem and self-confidence. And that is the formula for the self-worth that you're talking about. So, if I'm only charging 500, am I worth it? If I'm charging $5,000, oh my God, am I worth it? And then if I say no because they can't afford me, not that I'm too expensive, but I'm a firm believer, if your price is too high, that person or a company just can't afford you. And if somebody lands on, this is my value, this is my worth, own it, and I'm 100% with you. Say no or take away some of the services. Don't give them a discount. Discount's a 4-letter word, but I mean, there's that fear as a creative, like self-confidence. What if it's the last project and I say no and there's not another one around the corner? I mean, you wrangle with that, I'm sure, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. But the problem is that what happens is that you say yes to everything, then you have no time, you possibly burn out, and you're making no money in the process. So I was taught quite early on. I don't even know where you just find it by learning and asking questions, I suppose. But it's almost like the 30% rule. So if I'm getting 10 people ask me for work, I only really want 3 of them to say yes to me, because then I know that my prices are somewhat competitive. If you've got I see a lot of people saying, I sent out 5 proposals and every one of them said yes. And I'm like, that's because you're too cheap. Do you know what I mean? So there has to be this kind of process of you have to understand in business that people are going to say no. There's still people that come to me asking me whether I can do logos for $50. Do you know what I mean? That still happens. Do you know what I mean? So you've got to. It's not that it ever goes away. It's just that you start to understand that. Okay, look, I know the work that I do is going to make this person money. So for that to be okay and for that to be fair, I need to be making money out of this too, because I know how much money they're going to make out of it. It needs to become a business transaction, rather than this kind of random piece of expenditure, or a luxury. It needs to be a business transaction that when you can prove that to a client with case studies, with other work, and, breaking down some goals and objectives that were achieved with other clients, and look what this work we did for this client has helped them do this. It becomes much easier to sell yourself and your higher prices.
You're listening to Agency Bites, a podcast for agency owners with agency coach Steve Guberman from Agency Outside. To get a free agency assessment from Steve, reach out to see if you're eligible.
You have in your pricing, one of your posts, some of your content, you talk about a 13% rule, where it's all right, if I come up with a price, add another 13%. Is that just an arbitrary number you came up with? Or
I'm covered in tattoos,
where do you get 13
mate.
from?
Totally covered in tattoos. Grew up with 13 being a lucky number or an unlucky number.
Okay.
But it is a rule. It is a rule that works. If when you start to add, the problem is creative people on the whole generally do undersell themselves and undervalue themselves. So, for example, very quick maths, obviously, isn't it? If I'm charging $1,000, if somebody's willing to pay $1,000, they're also willing to pay 1,130, which is 13%. So, this was something that a good friend of mine, Tom Ross, was talking to me about once, and he was like, if somebody's willing to pay 500, they're willing to pay 600. If somebody's willing to pay 750, they're probably willing to spend 1,000. Somebody's willing to spend 5,000, they're probably willing to spend 7. Do you know what I mean? And this is where pricing psychology and understanding that kind of side of it is really, really important. Because we think, and this is why the 13% rule is a bit of fun, but it works, So the next time anybody here listening is thinking what should I charge? And they figure out a price, and let's say it's X, just add. I mean, if you're not comfortable with 13%, add 5%. Add 10%, whatever it is, just add a little bit to it. And I guarantee that client will still come back and say yes. And then what happens is you start to go, okay, well, maybe I've got a little bit more room. Maybe I am worth a little bit more than I think I am. And you can start to like, I got into a stage of like every client that came to me, I would just add on to my prices. So if it was like 5% every single time over a year, do you know what I mean? That starts to add up.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? And
Fully agree. Yeah.
It's a game that you have to play with yourself. And it's not to take the piss out of clients. It's not to eat them for all they're worth. It's to actually make you realize that the work that you're doing, people can afford you at 10% more than what you think they can, ultimately. And that helps you build your confidence with pricing.
Yeah, no, I love it. I fully agree with that. I think it's important. We undervalue ourselves. And so when you come up with a number, whether it's finely calculated by the best spreadsheet in the world with the most accurate hours and whatever, it's still undervalued. And so I was curious just about the number, like where it came from. So I think that's brilliant. That's just, your lucky number. I've typically just been like, add 20%. If they're going to say yes to 10K, they're going to say yes to 12K. Or right there with you. Talk about, just because I'm super intrigued by it, like the evolution of the partnership and how it came about with Lincoln. And like, what does that mean for you in your day to day between balancing education and design and now partnering with Dan and his team?
So, great question. So ultimately, Lincoln. So there's over the years I've managed to create two. I'll kind of go round the houses here, but one of my favorite sayings that has kind of helped me progress is by, I don't know who it's by actually, to be fair, but I think it's either Aristotle or Confucius or something like that. But it's the man who chases two rabbits catches neither. So for a long time, I had clients and I had designers. I was doing the same thing for them, helping them with design, but they both required two very different marketing strategies. Somewhat they can collide over, but this takes one type of energy, this takes another type of energy. Like maybe one I prefer than the other. Do you know what I mean? I very much have now over 20 years of servicing clients. Like the next 20 years for me are going to be helping designers. I got a lot of energy here right now. So that's what I'm going to be leaning heavily into. Yeah. So obviously with the amount of leads that still come through Made by James, obviously because I've been designing for so long and the referrals and the work that's out there and all the other bits and pieces, like I needed to partner with somebody who I aligned with, I get on with, who does not necessarily, I think Lincoln's work is way better than Made by James's ever will be, but it still has a very similar style. It's still within that very, like that skate kind of, very illustrative, very expressive, bold, fun, a little bit on the edge, do you know what I mean? Brand kits, illustrations of fucking skulls and axes and all that kind of shit. All that stuff that I love. Me partnering with Pentagram or Ogilvy would never have fucking happened. Do you know what I mean? We're just too far apart. And plus it also would have never have happened. But so ultimately what happened was I've built a friendship with Dan over the years, and, he's been like always so kind to me. And, he would come to conferences and watch me talk. And, we built like a relationship. And, it just got to a point where I was very open and honest with him and told him what my plans were for the future. And, there's this opportunity that, I still bring in a lot of work and I don't want to say no to it. And I also knew that Dan was in a place where he's just continuously scaling Lincoln, like bigger. And we just had an honest chat with each other. And it was like, well, like, how about I come on board at Lincoln and, I can focus heavily on helping the people that I want to help, designers, and we can still together execute this work that comes through. So it helps him. It's all about creating win-win-wins. Do you know what I mean? So being a
Yeah.
part of the Lincoln team frees me up because there are so many unbelievably talented designers within that space, but at the same time, I can bring in more revenue to the business and more eyes to the business. So ultimately what it does, it's not just like me winning or Dan and Lincoln winning. Like we both win out of it. And that's like within business, what I've learned is like you've sometimes got to let go to grow. Do you know what I mean? I had to let go of doing all the drawing, doing all the client calls, doing all the style guides, pushing all the pixels. I had to let go of that to be able to grow into the next version of myself. Partnering with it's a dream for me, a dream come true. I talked about them in my book. I've always championed Lincoln before they even fucking knew who James Martin was or Made by James was. And it's a proper full circle moment. But again, comes down to like they wouldn't have said yes to that opportunity if I hadn't proved myself within the space. Do you know what I mean? Hadn't done the things that I had done. All of that is off like my own back, hard work, showing up, creating content on the weekends when nobody else can be bothered. Do you know what I mean? It's taken a long time, but it's all, I believe everything that I've done, I always believe this, but everything that I've done to date has got me to the things that are happening now. Like, there's no magic sauce. I'm not a secret fucking millionaire or anything like that. Do you know what I mean? It's all just showing up, get it done, rinse and repeat, hope opportunities happen. If an opportunity comes up, take it. As long as it aligns with the person I want to become, and just consistently, just keep going. Good days, bad days, in the middle days, just don't stop and understand that. That's it. At the end of the day, what I want is I don't want to get to my deathbed and think, what if? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's heavy. And I fully agree with you that like everything that we've done up to this point has led to this point. And we have the ability to control what those day-to-day activities are. And you grinded and grinded and grinded with your eyes on, this is the prize. And now there's new prizes. And so it'll be exciting to see like what this relationship looks like and what you do next and how you get to devote the energies that you want to education and giving away content and building brands and partnering. So yeah, I love it, man. Like I said, I truly admire that you've had your laser focused eye on this is what I want. And you put it out to the universe, you did the work, and you didn't sit around waiting for it to happen. Like you did the work for it. So there's a huge lesson there for a lot of people.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, you got to have a little bit of luck along the way, haven't you? Just a tiny bit of luck, But I'm a big believer in you make your own luck a little bit, don't you? And like you say, it's difficult. It's difficult. The problem is like when. Well, like a lot of people listening here, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, business owners, freelancers, creative people, like what we do is we might set a goal or a target, we achieve it, then we're consistently moving on to the next one. Like, what's the next mountain? What's next? What's next? What's next? And like, if I could leave with people here with one thing is enjoy the view at the top of the mountain for a little bit before you move on to the next one, because it's always going to be there. I spent so long, I went from I didn't when I launched my book, for example, I didn't even enjoy it. I didn't really think about it. I was just already on to the next thing, which was building a course and then doing this and then doing that. And I never really enjoyed the things when they were happening or when I'd completed them, because I was already on to the next thing. So taking a little bit of time to breathe. And when I've done something, go, do you know what? Fucking well done. Do you know what I mean? Am I happy? Yeah, right now.
Pat yourself on the back.
Yeah.
But I think, again, whether it's creatives or just people that struggle with imposter syndrome or whatever, we struggle with celebrating the victories and patting ourselves on the back and taking the time to like appreciate the hard work we put into something and where we are. Not like this is, I've arrived, but like celebrate the little wins, the big wins, and everything in between. Yeah, I love it, man.
Yes, sir.
I want to hit you with a couple of quick rapid fire questions before we wrap up on time here. So something I try and do with everybody, just kind of switch it up. But for you, what's your biggest pet peeves that designers do? Whether it's, I'm not going to plant seeds, but things that you see designers doing, you're like, no, why did you do that?
Designer pet peeves. Do you know what? One thing I don't like is, especially as a logo designer, but it's a tough one because I know everybody starts somewhere, but choosing random fonts to pair with a really well designed symbol or mark. It's like, I'm going to put all the effort in here, and then I'm not going to give a shit about this. I'm just going to choose fucking Helvetica or Poppins or something, just chuck it next to it and hope it helps. So that's probably one of my pet peeves, because I'm such a lover of type. But I also know that everybody starts somewhere. But probably like random font choices that go with really well executed symbols does my head in, for sure. It's a very interesting, very personal one to me.
It hits me right here too, man. I get it. And so when this comes out, if that strikes a chord with other people, there will be a course on what I forget what you had called it, but there'll be a course on pairing typography and building typography and leaning in typography for brands. So when you hear this to the listeners,
I wasn't even segueing into that, but you're right. It's still I think that's why. I created the course because that was what was annoying me so much. Yeah.
Yeah. What is a tool that you've recently integrated into your life? And let's not leverage AI or Firefly or anything like that, but a tool, whether it's physical or digital, that you've brought into your life that you look back and you're like, how did I live without this thing in my life for so long?
I'll tell you what it is, and it's Slack. Do you know what I mean? The kind of what I just used to chat to my team on like messaging, or we've had it for a while, to be fair, but that kind of the way we can all communicate in one place, like the project management side of running a team. So we use Slack, Notion, Figma, a kind of a combination of those three things where we can all communicate there. So I would say like that kind of internal project management communication side of stuff, where it's all happening. Everything that happens in the right place is happening in the right place. Do you know what I mean? Has revolutionized the speed, the efficiency, and the profitability of my business. I'm going to choose those three. And I'm not a partner of any of them. So I'm not making any money. But Slack, Notion, and Figma are the three tools from like an internal team sense that we can live without.
Yeah. Awesome. And then my final question for you is just one of the most invaluable pieces of business advice that you can share, whether it's, from a design process or an operational process, something that just kind of rings true for you every day.
I kind of said it in the call, but you got to let go to grow. You have to you'll get to a point where you become the bottleneck. Like there are so many creatives and people that hit a ceiling and they try all the things, like especially an income ceiling or a revenue ceiling, they try all the things to make a difference, and they might increase their turnover by a little bit or increase it by 10% or 5% or whatever every year. And that growth doesn't feel like you're doing anything, because ultimately, if you're the bottleneck of your business, if everything has to come through you, it's going to back up. So decisions can't be made quick enough.
Yeah.
And you've got to find the right people in the right seats. Do you know what I mean? Let go to grow and find the right people for the right seats. And I'll tell you what, right now, like my business is set to double its revenue this year by having that mindset.
Beautiful. I love it. Those are core principles I think most businesses need to live by, and probably most do not. So beautiful. James, I am grateful for your friendship, your partnership, and your ability to share so honestly and openly with everybody today. Thank you for joining me.
Steve, it's been a pleasure, and I'm already excited about round 2. And thank you for being a lovely distraction for me today. I appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thanks, brother.
Thanks again for tuning in to Agency Bites. If you know someone with expert knowledge on a topic that agency owners would love to hear about, go to agencyoutsight.com/podcast-guest and nominate them.